In today's video, we're going to be using the Kenhub website to go over the anatomy of the stomach, and we're going to take a quiz at the end to see how well you're holding on to the information. Okay, so the first thing you're probably going to notice is that we are at the Kenhub homepage. And I'm doing this just in case you want to follow along at home, but once you're here, you find the stomach basically from two different avenues. You could either search for it directly in the search bar, or you can come down and click it here in the topic abdomen. But as soon as you do that, you're going to see there are a lot of other study units inside of this topic. We're going to go to the stomach, obviously. And then the second study unit, where it says structure of the stomach, we are going to click right there on the start button. Now, if you've never seen our study units, I really love them because there's so much information just kind of like placed very conveniently for you to work with. So we have learning objectives. You can see any associated videos we might have with that particular study topic. You can see the quiz, which we're going to be coming back to later. Yours, though, isn't going to say congratulations. Mine does because I did a quiz earlier just to make sure this was all working properly. And then you're also going to see atlas images. And these are what we're going to be using in today's video to kind of teach about the stomach. But I love our atlas images being here. It's just super convenient to like jump down as you're reading or looking around and just kind of make sure you're understanding what you're looking at. And then you can also see a summary at the end, kind of just summing up everything, obviously, with the key points about that structure or region. And then last, you will also see some related articles. So you can just continue studying. It all just kind of like feeds off each other. It's a really awesome and potent way to study. But we're going to scan back up and we are going to take a look at the atlas image here. Now this is actually a series of images. So I can kind of like hit next here with these arrows, and we're going to cycle through a series of images and then we're going to teach you about the stomach with them. But first and foremost, I want to orient you so you know what you're looking at. So this is an anterior view, meaning that you're looking at the stomach as though like you just like are looking at my stomach. But the way you know that this is an anterior view is this little cube down here. This forwardmost face is highlighted blue, and that tells you that it's an anterior view. If it was highlighted on the side, that'd be a lateral view, or if it was highlighted on top, that'd be a superior view. The other thing to take note of is that the green highlighted portion is highlighting the segment that you're talking about in that particular image. So, for example, this is the esophagus. And another way you can tell that this is the esophagus is because it also will highlight the text here, which is really, really awesome. But you can also see it down here as well. So I think that's kind of like all the setup we're going to need. Outside of the fact that I also want to mention that the stomach is in the upper left of your abdomen. It's not this. Like this thing that most people call their stomach is their abdomen. The stomach is in the upper left quadrant of it, and that is exactly what we are seeing here. But all right, all that's out of the way. Let's jump into this. So this first structure, like we mentioned, is the esophagus. Now the esophagus is your food tube. This is going to connect the stomach all the way up to your throat, or what's called the pharynx. So this is a long muscular tube that's just going to squeeze the digestive material that we call a bolus, and it's going to drop into the stomach. And so this is the esophagus here. So if we go to the next image, we then meet what's called the fundus. Now, my students have kind of gone back and forth as to whether or not this is the because fundus means end. Maybe I should preface it with that. So fundus means end. So is this the end of the esophagus or the end of the stomach? I would argue it's both. It doesn't really matter though. The point here is the fundus is going to be this superior most aspect of the stomach. In fact, this like whole ridgeline here is what we would call like the superior border. And it's important to understand what's in the area because on top of the stomach here and on top of the fundus is the diaphragm muscle. Now, the diaphragm muscle is like this dome-shaped, parachute-shaped muscle that separates your thoracic cavity, where the lungs and the heart are, from the abdomen. So it's going to be right on top of that stomach. And the reason why that's important is because the fundus also doesn't really expand much when you are eating. Now, gases will fill up the fundus and kind of push it up a little bit, but I want you to think about this. Like if it was, your whole stomach was just filled with food and it's pushing on that, it'd be pushing into the diaphragm. And we have a term for that. That's a hiatal hernia. I mean, arguably though, I guess I should say a hiatal hernia is when the stomach goes through the diaphragm. So it's not quite what's happening here. But the point is, like, you don't want this to expand. There is an entire muscle on top that we just want to avoid at all costs. So we're going to see that this is not the primary expandable portion of the stomach, but we call this the fundus. Then next we have what's called the cardia. Now that name, that word might seem familiar to you, and that's because cardia is in reference to the heart. The heart is also going to be located about right here. And so the heart sits on top of the diaphragm between either of the lungs. And so we just kind of name this region based off of its proximity to the heart. So this is just going to be the cardia. This is the transition point where the esophagus is turning into the stomach. So this is what we call the cardia of the stomach. Now, this next portion is what's called the body. And the body, this is the expandable portion. So it's going to project like down, like it's like at a 45-degree angle. It'll kind of like expand down, like so down towards your feet and also off to the side. But I think it's important to mention that we have these curvatures alongside the body. So this inside curvature here from the esophagus, going all the way down to what we're going to see as part of the small intestine, this is what we call the lesser curvature of the stomach. Then on the opposite side, we have this really long curvature here that we call the greater curvature. Now, there's other interesting aspects about these that we're not going to really get into. They're more clinically relevant, but there is some really fascinating tissue that drapes off of them called the omentum. So you have like the greater omentum and lesser omentum, but I'm getting sidetracked. The point here is you have this lesser curvature of the stomach and then this really long greater curvature of the stomach as well. But the body is the expandable portion. This is the part that really starts to move once you're filling it up with digestive material. Now, where does that digestive material travel through? Well, this is going to be the gastric canal. So the gastric canal is like this thin line here that goes from the esophagus and travels down to what we're going to see is in the pylorus or the pyloric canal or the pyloric part towards pyloric sphincter. I just said pyloric a lot. The point here is, I want you to think about this, right? Like, let's say like you're snacking on some chips or something. As that enters, that bolus of chewed up chips enters through into the stomach through the esophagus, it's really just going to travel through this gastric canal and it's going to then head out. So the thing is, this can expand the more you eat. Obviously, this is, going to widen a bit, but the thing is, the gastric canal, if you look at these little folds, they also line up really well with the direction of the muscles, but we're going to get there in just a second. The point here is, this is kind of like the avenue that most of the digestive material is going to travel through as it's making its way down through the stomach and going to your intestines. So we call that the gastric canal. And this is the pyloric part. So you could call this the pylorus, pyloric part. Basically, this is the gatekeeper. So pylorus means gatekeeper. And it's called that because, well, what it's doing is it is keeping the hydrochloric acid that's inside of the stomach from emptying into the small intestine whenever it wants, right? Like, it's going to have to happen, but you want it to happen at the ideal time. And so the pylorus is the gatekeeper, and this part of the stomach is what we call the pyloric part. And then we have the antrum. So the antrum, this is where, so if you're looking at the curvature, it's kind of like you have this curvature going down, and then it's like you hit this horizontal aspect. That's what we call the antrum. So this is going to be the antrum of the stomach. It's just like this level part right here. Then we're going to get to the actual pyloric canal. So the pyloric canal, this is where everything's kind of like filtering in and heading towards that pyloric sphincter, which we will mention in just a moment. But all of this is basically part of that pyloric part. I keep saying pyloric a lot. That's a very common word right now. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the different muscular layers. So the way I always describe this is like, picture your stomach like an onion. There's multiple layers to it. You could peel off layer by layer, and you're going to see different directions for the muscle fibers. So the muscle fibers, based on their direction, that's going to do something different when it contracts. So these right here are what we call the oblique fibers. So the oblique fibers are really strongly linked to like the churning of the stomach, because a lot of people don't know this. The stomach obviously has hydrochloric acid inside of it, but it also mechanically is a blender. Right, it does mechanical digestion, right? There's two forms of digestion. You have chemical digestion and mechanical. So I want you to think about it. It's like you bite an apple. All that chewing that you're doing, that's mechanical digestion. You're literally pulverizing it. But then you're slobbering all over it with your saliva, and that is going to start contributing to a chemical form of digestion. And then when you swallow that bolus down your esophagus and it goes and drops into your stomach, the stomach is going to continue the same thing. The hydrochloric acid is continuing the chemical digestion, but the stomach itself is going to churn it. it's going to move it around. I like to describe it similar to like a cement mixer. And it's going to move all that digestive material around, exposing more surface area to the hydrochloric acid. And it's going to create this nutrient paste that we call chyme. So the oblique fibers are really good at that churn. They're really, really good at that churn. And then we have the circular fibers. So the circular fibers, or the circular layer, these muscle fibers, basically where they get really thick, you create a sphincter. So if we followed this down, in fact, I didn't even notice that. It's nice. So this green line here is showing you the circular layer. And so what's happening is this right here is a thickened portion of that circular layer that we call the pyloric sphincter. So when you make it really thick, it creates a closed off area. And that's a gate, right? That's a valve, essentially. So this circular layer is really good at constricting. So it can kind of help to push things through or to prevent things from going through inside of the stomach. And then we have the longitudinal layer, the longitudinal fibers. And these are just going to be going up and down the length of the stomach. So these are really good at propelling material through. So kind of like pushing it from that fundus down towards the pylorus. But it has to work in tandem with the circular layer to do it. So it's kind of like the circular layer like contracts, and then the longitudinal layer like pushes it through. So you're just, and that creates that peristalsis, that wave-like movement as the material is pushed through the stomach. So these are 3 layers. So just as a quick refresher, right? So we have the oblique fibers, which churn. Then we have the circular layer, which kind of like constricts. And then we have the longitudinal layer, which helps to propel. All 3 of these are muscular layers on the external aspect of the stomach. All right. It's funny. So here's the lesser curvature. So I already mentioned it, but now you can see that lesser curvature highlighted right here, which I'm imagining. There it is. We can then see the greater curvature of the stomach just kind of going all around that superior border on the top of the fundus as it goes down towards the pylorus. Let's see here. So then, now we have the pyloric sphincter. So the pyloric sphincter, what's cool is you can see it zoomed in here. This is, I'm pretty sure this is the case. I believe this to be the strongest sphincter in the body. I am pretty sure. If it's not the strongest, it's one of the strongest. But I mean, it has to be. Like I mentioned earlier, the amount of stomach acid that's in here, you just don't want to go in and just randomly start digesting your intestines. Like that's an important gig, right? That's an important job. So the pyloric sphincter needs to be extraordinarily strong in order to pull that off. But this is just a thickening of that circular layer. And what it's doing is it's just segmenting off the stomach from what we're going to see is the duodenum. So duodenum is just part of the small intestine. So, and then right here, you can see the pyloric orifice. This is just like leading into that sphincter. So we're kind of like just ramping up to it. Because if you remember, we had the antrum, then we had the pyloric canal, then it turns into pyloric orifice, which is just like that surface here at like meeting with the actual sphincter as it's going towards that small intestine. So that's the pyloric orifice. And then we meet the duodenum. Sometimes people will say duodenum. I do believe it's more proper to say duodenum, but it doesn't matter. It's like potato type thing. This right here is the superior part of the duodenum. So duodenum means 12 fingers breadths. So it's like you have 4 fingers, 8 fingers, 12 fingers. That's how long the duodenum is. And this is a site of a lot of digestion. So it's not just about absorption here. This is where different things are going to enter. So this is where bile and pancreatic enzymes are going to enter into the digestive tract. But this is just the first part of it, and it's just going to be on the other side of that pyloric sphincter. So I kind of went through that a little quickly, but again, you're always welcome to pause this, look at this, and go back. But I just want to real quickly, just lightning fast go through this, right? In the sense that food or a bolus is going to go through the esophagus, empty into the stomach, and then all of these layers of muscle, right? So basically the circular layer, the longitudinal layer, and that oblique layer are going to contract and help to kind of churn it and move it through as it progresses through the stomach down to the pyloric part. So it's going from the fundus down to the body and then down into the pyloric part, where it's going to go through the antrum, the pyloric canal, the pyloric orifice, through the pyloric sphincter, and then into the superior part of the duodenum. But just to be clear here, again, it's kind of moving through the fundus. The fundus, it kind of avoids, because remember, the fundus is more about gases than anything else. But that's essentially it. Now, I don't know if the quiz is going to mention this. I just see it's not highlighted right here. But if you see all these folds, these are what we call gastric rugae. So the gastric rugae are stomach folds. And what's cool about them is they allow for like expansion of the stomach, and they even can help to grind material as the stomach is churning. So the gastric rugae are just all these little stomach folds. Just chances are you're looking in there and thinking about, which by the way, really super cool. If you feel the gastric rugae in the stomach, it feels very soft and velvety. It's a really interesting feeling that you have. So, all right, let's jump on over to a quiz. So what we're going to do is we're going to scan up here, and you can even see here, gastric folds. Okay, we're going to come up to a quiz. And what I want to do is we're going to do a study session. Now, I'm going to reduce the time down to 5 minutes, and we're going to see how many we can do in here. Again, I did a quick little run through, but I didn't get too far, because what's cool is if you actually get really far, it can even start to save how far you are in your progress. But let's just hit start quiz and see what happens. So you can see getting everything loaded. All right, so we're automatically jumping into 4 of these. So it says the circular layer of muscle coat of stomach, right? So we're looking for the circular layer. So the goal here is I'm going to give you a quick moment, and I want you to be able to choose which one. So I'm going to kind of talk through it a little bit. You can see like this upper portion here. You can see this at more of a diagonal angle down here, the top right here. And then we can also see it through kind of like this more horizontal view right here. Remember, you are always welcome to pause this if you want to try and figure this out for yourself. But again, we're asking about the circular layer. And that is this one right here. So the circular layer, remember, that is going to be the one. Oh, it's interesting. So we can hear, I'm going to actually turn off the sound just in case we don't have to hear. What's cool about our quizzes, though, is every single time you're going to move to the next question, it's going to actually say it out loud, which is really super useful. But for our video today, we're not going to do that so much. All right, so we're looking for the oblique fibers this time. The oblique fibers. So again, we have the same images in a slightly different order. Now, go ahead. Give you a second to pause if you want to look at this and take a look and see if you can figure it out. So the oblique fibers are going to be right here. Now, again, as it transfers over, I want to show you that we can actually go back. This is another feature I really like about our quizzes. You're able to jump back, take a look, and see. But as we're looking at this, this is going to be going at like a 45-degree angle, thus the oblique name. And so as it's going like in that direction, remember, this is the one that's all about the churn. All right. This time we're asking about the fundus. The fundus. And again, we have the same images. So take a brief moment, look them over. And the answer is going to be here. So the top. So again, we're going to jump back real quick to help explain it. So the fundus is just going to be that superior most aspect of the stomach. This is the one that is going to fill up with gases. There really shouldn't be much expansion happening here. Otherwise, it's pushing into your diaphragm. And again, it's not like it's an actual hernia, but probably not the most comfortable. All right, so now we're asking for the esophagus. Well, I mean, it's the same 4 images, so chances are you've probably figured out which one it's going to be, but I want you to go ahead and give it a shot anyways. That is going to be this one right here. So click on it and we'll go back and explain it real quickly. So the esophagus is that long muscular tube, right? It's going from the pharynx, going from the throat all the way down and going into the stomach right here. All right, so gastric folds. Good thing I talked about this, right? So what are the gastric folds? And they give great images because each of them are showing this folded region. However, I kind of probably ruined that one. I'm sorry. These are going to be the gastric folds. So I'm not even going to click on it. Just going to hang out right here. All of these folds here, remember, these are important for expansion. They can even help with grinding. They're really soft to the feel. And they are going to go all the way up to the fundus, by the way. If we could see this all the way open, they're going to go all the way up, more or less. They do start to get thinner up here. And then on the top surface of the stomach, they also kind of disappear. But it's going to be this image down here. Then we have the gastric canal. I'm going to let you do this one. I'm not going to ruin it. All right, so I want you to look at all 4 of these images. You can pause it if you need to. It's got this little narrow band. Got this little sliver here. Got this bigger sliver. And then we have these. It's going to be this one. So I'm going to go back. So I'll click on it so that we can see it. So the gastric canal, remember, this is the portion that, and what's funny is now I could probably actually more properly explain it now that we understand the longitudinal layer of the muscle layers inside of the stomach. So the longitudinal layer, if you recall, is the layer of muscles that are going to run with the length of the stomach. What happens is the longitudinal muscle creates the gastric canal. So this is, the longitudinal muscle will help to contract and push digestive material from the esophagus down towards that pyloric part. So this right here is going to be that gastric canal. Oh, we got to go fast. 25 seconds. I've been rambling. All right, what is this? What is this? So if you're looking at it, it says lesser curvature of the stomach, circular layer of the muscular coat of the stomach, fundus of the stomach, body of the stomach. I want to get one more after this. That's going to be the body. Remember, the body is the more expandable portion. I got to keep going. All right, this is the last one. It's going to let us do this regardless, so it's not going to kick us out. But just I don't want to go back. So the body, though, is the expandable portion. That's the one that's going to push out and down to the left. All right, so what is this? Again, is the question. And we have our options are esophagus, cardia of stomach, oblique fibers of muscular coat of stomach, or the greater curvature of the stomach. So I want you to really think about this in terms of its location and what could be around it. Again, I'll give you a quick moment. This is the cardia. Remember, the cardia is in reference to the heart, and so the heart is pretty close to the region, so it makes sense to kind of call it that. All right. So we did pretty good. So you can see, hey, we improved from our last study session, which you really weren't here for. That was all me. But hey, we did pretty good. I only clicked around a few times, but yeah, that's pretty much it. These study sessions are awesome. I really encourage you to just check them out, and you can see, because what's cool from here is you could then come back and you can start looking at a little bit more. You could even come back to this and start reinforcing your learning and cycle through them pretty quickly and go, oh yeah, I get that. And you just kind of bounce back and forth. And then if you're feeling really spicy, I'll push back a couple times. Whoops, going back way too much. Actually, this is where I wanted to go. If you go down, you could then even do our other stomach study unit. That's totally fine. Or you could just go and explore other study units. Thanks for watching, everybody. Now, if you are interested in checking out the Kenhub platform yourself, we're going to go ahead and leave links down below in the description. But I also want to bring your awareness to this thing. So this is our physical copy of the Atlas. And this is just as great. I mean, it's the same stuff. What's cool is it's physically in your hands as opposed to being on a screen. And the reason why that can be highly useful is in case you are in a lab setting. This is actually perfectly sized for a lab coat, but it's also just an outstanding atlas that, and I know this is biased, but I'm going to keep on saying it, that I really do believe this is probably the best atlas on the market. But even if you don't agree with me, you can't say this isn't a great atlas. We're going to go ahead and leave a link for that as well down in the description below. But thanks for hanging out with me. Hopefully you learned something about the stomach in today's video. We're going to be doing a lot more of these, so be sure to leave a comment down below what you want to see us go over and teach next. Thanks for coming, and I'll see you next time.